The human appears. The night air carried the sound of heavy footsteps, and the blind alien girl froze in fear. She had learned that footsteps in the dark often meant danger, not safety. Her hands trembled as she clutched a rotten piece of bread she had just found. She pressed it close to her chest, knowing that even this filthy scrap was all she had to survive. Voices echoed through the alley, deep and cruel. The voices of alien raiders who roamed the streets at night. They laughed as they spotted her crawling on her knees near the trash heap. "Look at the cursed one," one of them sneered. "She eats what even beasts leave behind." Another laughed. "Take her food. She cannot fight. She cannot see." The blind girl shook her head, whispering, "No, please, it is mine." Her voice was weak, almost broken, yet she tried to shield the bread with her body. The raiders did not care. They enjoyed cruelty. They stepped closer, their claws scraping against the stone. She could hear their armor rattling, their heavy boots crushing the ground. Her heart pounded. Tears filled her blind eyes. She thought this was the end. She thought they would beat her again and take even this worthless scrap. Then it happened. Another set of footsteps entered the alley, steady, strong, and unafraid. The laughter of the raiders suddenly stopped, their voices turning sharp. "Who are you? This is not your place." The girl froze, listening, her sharp ears catching the sound of movement. A new voice answered, calm but filled with power. "Step away from her." It was a voice unlike any she had ever heard. Rough, yet warm, heavy with something she could not name. It was a human, though she did not yet know what that meant. The raiders spat and cursed. "This cursed girl is ours. Why protect trash?" The human's boots scraped against the ground as he moved forward. "I see no trash," he said firmly. "I see someone who deserves to live." Before the raiders could laugh again, there was a sudden sound of fists striking flesh. The girl heard the sharp crack of bone, the grunt of pain, the heavy fall of bodies hitting the ground. She covered her ears, trembling, unsure of what was happening. But the sounds kept coming, swift, hard strikes, the hiss of anger, the crash of bodies against the walls, then silence, broken only by the girl's uneven breathing. She waited, afraid to move, clutching her piece of bread tighter. Then she felt a gentle hand touch hers. Not rough, not cruel, but steady. The bread was not taken from her. Instead, another object was pressed into her palm, soft and warm. She sniffed it and froze. It was real food, fresh food, something she had not tasted in years. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why, for me." The human's voice came close, calm and kind, because even broken things can be treasure. She did not understand, but his words lit something inside her. For so long, everyone had called her cursed, useless, broken, a burden. No one had ever called her treasure. No one had ever treated her as more than trash. Her tears spilled freely, though she could not see the face of the one who spoke. The human stayed silent, letting her eat, watching her with eyes that carried both sadness and strength. The raiders lay groaning on the ground, too afraid to rise. They had seen what this strange human could do with only his hands, and they did not dare challenge him again. The girl chewed slowly, her body shaking from hunger and relief. Each bite tasted like hope, something she thought she had lost long ago. When she finished, she turned her face toward the sound of his breathing. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Will you come again?" The human hesitated, then spoke softly. "Yes, little one. I will not let you be alone." The girl held her rotten bread in one hand and the fresh food in the other. For the first time, she felt that maybe she was not cursed. Maybe she was not forgotten. Somewhere in the darkness, a spark of light had appeared, and it came in the shape of a human, the bond of kindness. The nights in the ruined city grew colder, but the blind alien girl no longer faced them alone, for every evening, just as the moons began to rise and the shadows thickened across the broken alleys, she would hear those steady human footsteps, calm and strong, echoing against the stone like a promise that he had not forgotten her. At first she thought it was a dream, for in her life nothing good had ever lasted. Kindness always faded, and hope was something she had buried long ago. Yet the human kept returning, always with food in his pack, always with something in his hands, and always with that voice which seemed to cut through her darkness like a lantern in the void. He never spoke much about himself, but she learned about him through the way he moved, the way he fought off those who tried to harm her, and the way he placed food and clean water into her hands before he ever thought of himself. Sometimes he brought strange objects, smooth pieces of metal or crystal that hummed with faint energy. She did not know what they were, but when she touched them, she felt warmth in her chest. As if they were alive, she called them treasures. Though she still did not understand why he gave them to her, slowly the girl began to change. Her body, once weak and trembling from hunger, grew stronger with each meal. Her steps steadier, her head held higher, though her eyes remained blind. Her hearing sharpened, her senses grew sharper, and she began to move with more confidence. The human taught her simple things: how to listen to the direction of the wind to sense the open paths, how to count her steps so she could map the alleys in her mind, how to hear the difference between a friendly voice and one filled with danger, and every lesson carried patience. For he never mocked her, never scolded her, never called her cursed. Instead, he spoke as if she mattered, as if her life had meaning. For the first time, she began to laugh. A weak and broken laugh at first, but laughter all the same. The human would smile quietly when he heard it. Though she could not see it, she could feel it in his voice. When he asked her to repeat a sound or to take another step, she obeyed with trust she never thought she could give. He never forced her, yet she followed him because she wanted to, because he had become more than a stranger. He had become her light in a world of endless night. The streets around them whispered of change. The other aliens noticed the girl's strength. They noticed the human who walked beside her. They noticed how she carried pieces of metal that seemed to shine even in her blind hands. And whispers turned into suspicion, for her people had always believed she was cursed. That blindness was weakness. Yet now she walked with her head raised. Now she no longer crawled in filth but stood beside a warrior who defied their cruelty. The elders watched from a distance, their eyes filled with distrust, muttering that no cursed child should hold human gifts. But the girl did not care. For the first time she felt alive. One night, as the human sat beside her in the ruined corner of the city, he spoke more than usual. He told her that in his world, there were people who once threw away broken tools, broken machines, broken lives. Yet there were also people who picked up those broken things and made them whole again. They saw value where others saw only waste, and he told her that she was not broken. She was not waste, she was treasure waiting to shine. She did not know why, but his words made her chest ache and her throat tighten. She pressed her face into her hands, whispering that no one had ever said that before, not once in her entire life. The bond between them grew deeper with each passing day. She began to wait for his footsteps, her ears trained to recognize them even among 1,000 sounds. When he arrived, she would smile. When he left, she would feel the air grow colder. Yet inside her heart burned a warmth she had never felt before, a fragile hope, as if the universe itself had chosen to give her a second chance through this strange human. She did not understand his world. She did not understand his ways, but she understood kindness. And kindness was a language she had been starving for all her life. But kindness has a way of drawing eyes, and soon the whispers of the city grew louder. Envy stirred in the hearts of those who watched. Suspicion twisted the minds of those who hated humans. And fear rose among the elders who believed that treasure in the hands of the blind was more dangerous than any weapon. The girl did not know it yet, but her bond with the human was about to be tested. For where kindness grows, jealousy always follows. And where treasure is found, others will always try to steal it. The suspicion of the aliens, the change in the blind girl did not go unnoticed, for the ruined streets were filled with eyes, and in the city where whispers carried like smoke, no secret could remain hidden for long. At first it was only the curious stares of children who pointed at her when she passed, amazed that the cursed one who once crawled in filth now walked with her head lifted, guided not by sight but by confidence. Then it was the murmurs of merchants who saw that she no longer begged at their stalls, for she carried food in her hands, clean food that none could explain. Soon, it became the angry mutterings of raiders who had once beaten her without resistance. For now, they remembered the night a strange human came and broke their pride with nothing but his fists, and they dared not approach her again. But most dangerous of all were the eyes of the elders. For the elders were the keepers of old beliefs, and to them, weakness was a curse that should be hidden. Blindness was shame that should be erased, and anyone who defied their traditions was a threat to their power. They watched the girl from afar, noticing the way her once-starved frame grew stronger with each day, noticing how she carried in her small hands the strange objects the human gave her, scraps of metal, pieces of crystal, fragments of machines that glowed faintly under the moonlight. The people called them trash, but the elders saw something else. They saw danger. Whispers reached the council chambers, words twisted by envy and fear. Some said the human was a deceiver who used the blind girl as a tool. Others claimed the girl herself was no longer cursed, but cursed them all. For she dared to live when she should have died. The elders sat in their stone seats, their long robes brushing against the floor as they argued, their voices rising like storm winds. And finally one spoke with bitterness. A human brings her treasures, and she hides them like secrets if this continues. The people will begin to believe she has worth, and that belief will break everything we have built, another hissed. She must be tested. She must be stripped of what is not hers. For trash should never wear the mask of treasure. The girl knew nothing of these dark discussions. She only felt the tension in the air when she walked. She heard footsteps following her longer than before. She sensed voices that cut off when she passed. She felt the sharp edge of hatred pressing against her back like a knife she could not see. Still, she tried to hold on to the bond she shared with the human, for he taught her that even broken things had value. Yet the city was not ready to believe it. One evening, when the human placed a piece of glowing crystal into her hands, she held it close and whispered with joy, "It feels warm, like the sun." But she did not know that eyes watched her from the shadows, eyes that burned with suspicion and greed before the night ended. Those whispers reached the elders again, and the story grew like fire. The cursed girl holds human weapons. The cursed girl hides human secrets. The cursed girl is no longer weak, but dangerous. The council made their decision. They would not wait for her to grow stronger. They would not allow the human to spread his strange belief that even the blind could be treasure. So they spread their own whispers, poisonous words among the streets. They told the people that the girl was touched by forbidden power, that the human used her to control the city, that her blindness was only a disguise, and that soon her hidden treasures would destroy them all. Fear spread quickly, and fear turned to anger. When the girl walked through the market the next morning, she felt the change immediately. The silence was heavy. Not the silence of pity she once knew, but the silence of hatred. Merchants refused to let her touch their goods. Children who once pointed at her now threw stones at her feet. Voices muttered curses. "Cursed one, deceiver! Human puppet!" She held the crystal close to her chest and tried to walk on. But the crowd grew louder, pressing closer, threatening to strip her of everything she carried. Before they could strike, the human appeared at her side, his shadow falling across her like a shield, his eyes scanning the crowd with fire and his voice sharp with anger. "She is not cursed. She is not a puppet. She is worth more than any of you can see." His words cut through the air like steel, for he spoke with conviction, not fear. And though the crowd backed away for now, their eyes still burned with suspicion. The elders, watching from their towers, clenched their teeth, for the human's defense of the girl was stronger than their whispers. Yet they would not stop. They would plot in silence, and they would wait for their chance to break her. The girl, though shaken, felt the human's steady hand guiding her away from the crowd, and for a moment she was safe, yet deep in her heart she knew safety could not last forever. The bond between her and the human was now a flame burning in the dark, but flames always attract those who wish to snuff them out. The treasures revealed. The blind alien girl sat quietly in the corner of the ruined chamber where she often met the human, the strange glowing crystal still clutched in her small hands. She could not see it, yet she felt its warmth, a pulse like a heartbeat, steady and strong. She wondered why he gave her such things: pieces of metal that hummed, fragments of broken machines, crystals that glowed faintly even when the world was dark. To her people, these were nothing but trash, worthless fragments thrown away by passing traders or scavengers, yet to the human they were treasures. And slowly she began to believe they were treasures too. One evening, as the wind howled through the empty streets and the city seemed to hold its breath, the human knelt before her and placed several pieces into her hands. Her fingers traced the edges, smooth and sharp, heavy and light. All different, all strange. She tilted her head, her voice trembling as she asked, "Why do you give me these? Why not keep them for yourself?" The human was silent for a long moment. Then he answered softly, "Because they are not broken, they only look broken. Because even in scraps there is meaning, and because you can see it better than anyone else." She frowned, confused, for she could not see anything at all. Yet his words echoed in her heart. She held the pieces close, and something stirred within her, an image she could not see but could feel, as if the parts whispered stories of what they once were, and what they could be again. She realized that her hands trembled not with weakness but with possibility. Perhaps these were not fragments of trash, but pieces of a greater whole, and perhaps she was not cursed but chosen to hold them. That thought frightened her, yet it also gave her strength. The days passed, and each time the human brought her something new, she listened carefully to the sound it made when struck. She traced its shape. She imagined what it might be. Slowly, she began to piece them together in her mind, creating an image she could not see but could sense. The broken objects were not garbage at all. They were remnants of human craft, pieces of technology that once lit the stars, pieces that carried memories of fire, light, and life. The realization made her chest tighten, for she understood at last that the human was not giving her scraps to pity her. He was giving her treasure because he believed she was worthy to carry it. But the city around her did not share that belief. Already the whispers had turned into shouts. Already the elders had begun to poison the minds of the people, saying that she carried weapons, that she hid forbidden power, that the human used her as a vessel for destruction. And so one night when she sat quietly in her alley, a group of angry voices surrounded her. They shouted curses, demanding she give up the things she carried. They called her cursed. They called her thief. They demanded to see what the human had given her. Her hands tightened around the crystal, fear choking her throat. But she remembered the human's words, that even broken things could shine, that even she was treasure. Her voice shook as she whispered, "These are not curses, these are not lies. They are pieces of hope." The crowd laughed cruelly, calling her mad, yet before they could take them, the human appeared once again, his presence like a wall of fire, his voice calm but sharp as steel. "She carries nothing dangerous, only what you are too blind to see." His words silenced the crowd for a moment, but their eyes burned with hate, and the elders who watched from the shadows only grew more certain that both the human and the girl must be brought before them. Later that night, the girl sat with the human, her hands still trembling from fear, and she whispered, "They will take them from me. They will never let me keep them." The human shook his head and placed his hand gently over hers, his voice steady. "They cannot take what is already inside you. They cannot steal your worth. They cannot change that you are treasure." His words wrapped around her like a shield, and though she was blind, she felt as if her world was beginning to glow. It was then that she truly understood. The objects in her hands were not the real treasure. She was her strength to survive when abandoned, her will to walk when broken, her courage to speak when silenced. All of these were worth more than gold or crystal, and the human had seen it when no one else would. She pressed the glowing shard to her chest, whispering to herself that she was not cursed, not anymore. She was chosen. But as the bond between her and the human grew stronger, so too did the storm around them. The elders' whispers became commands. The people's suspicion became anger. And soon a decision would be made. The girl, blind and fragile yet filled with new strength, would be summoned to stand before the council, and the treasures she carried would either condemn her as cursed or reveal her as something far greater. The test of courage, The day of judgment arrived faster than the blind alien girl expected. The whispers that had poisoned the city for weeks finally reached their sharpest point, and the elders could no longer sit in silence. They summoned her before the council, their voices heavy with authority. Declaring that the cursed one who carried human gifts would be judged for her worth, the people gathered in the great chamber, their eyes full of suspicion, fear, and anger. And the girl stood at the center, her thin hands clutching the glowing crystal against her chest as if it were her heart itself. She could not see their faces, but she could feel their stares like knives piercing her skin. The chamber was vast, the air thick with smoke from burning torches, the walls carved with old symbols of power. The elders sat high upon their stone seats, draped in long robes, their voices echoing as they spoke. One leaned forward and hissed, "You were born cursed, blind, and useless. Yet now you walk with treasures not meant for your kind. Explain why a human gives you what you cannot understand. Explain why you, of all beings, deserve to hold them." The words struck her like a blow. Her lips trembled, her legs shook, but in her mind she heard another voice, the voice of the human who stood silently at her side, the voice that had told her she was treasure, not trash. For a moment, fear threatened to crush her. She remembered the nights of hunger, the laughter of raiders who beat her, the cold loneliness of being abandoned. Yet she also remembered the human's steady hand guiding her, the warmth of food pressed into her palm, the glowing shard against her skin, and the words that gave her strength. She raised her head, though her eyes could not see, and her voice carried across the chamber. "I was called cursed. I was thrown away. I crawled in the dirt for scraps, but even in the dirt I lived. I did not die, and when a human came, he did not see trash. He saw worth. These are not weapons. These are not curses. These are reminders that even broken things can shine, that even the blind can walk with light." Her words spread through the crowd like a spark. Some gasped, some muttered, some grew angrier, but others fell into silence, for they could not deny the strength in her voice. The elders, however, were not moved. One slammed his staff against the stone and shouted, "Pretty words do not change truth. You cannot prove you are not cursed. You cannot prove these are treasures and not lies. If you are truly worthy, then show us. Show us what no cursed one could ever show." The girl's heart raced. Her hands trembled around the crystal. She whispered to herself that she was treasure. She whispered the words the human had given her. Yet doubt crawled into her mind. How could she prove anything? She was blind. She was small. She had nothing. She wanted to collapse, to hide. But then she felt a warm hand on her shoulder. Steady and firm, the human stepped forward, his voice deep and calm. "If proof is what you want, then proof I will give. Not of her curse, but of her strength. Not of her weakness, but of her worth." From his cloak, the human pulled a fragment unlike the others, a shard that glowed brighter than fire, its light filling the chamber and casting long shadows across the walls. The people gasped. The elders leaned forward, their eyes wide with shock. "This is human craft," one whispered. "A weapon," another hissed. But the human shook his head. "Not a weapon. A light, and she will show you what it means." He placed the shard into the girl's trembling hands. Her fingers closed around it, and warmth flooded her body. She felt its energy rush through her veins, not burning, not harming, but filling her with courage. She stood taller, her head lifted, her blind eyes glowing faintly in the reflection of the shard's light. Her voice rose again, stronger this time. "You call me cursed, but I say curse is not blindness. Curse is the heart that refuses to see worth. You call these scraps, but I say scraps are not worthless. Scraps are seeds that grow when given a chance. I am blind, but I can see more than you. I can see that treasure is not gold. Treasure is not power. Treasure is kindness, courage, hope, and the will to survive." The chamber fell into silence, the crowd frozen by her words. For in that moment, the cursed blind girl did not sound weak. She did not sound broken. She sounded like a leader, like a flame burning against the darkness. And though the elders clenched their teeth and whispered in anger, the people themselves began to stir. some lowering their heads in shame, some looking at her with new eyes. The test of courage was not one of strength or sight. It was one of heart, and the blind girl had passed it. The human placed his hand once more upon her shoulder, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. "She has shown you more than you deserved to hear. She has shown you that light can come from where you least expect it. Remember her words, for they are more powerful than any weapon." The crowd remained silent, torn between fear of the elders and awe of the girl, but deep inside the chamber something had shifted, something that could not be undone. The Cursed One had spoken, and her courage had become truth. The transformation and legacy. The great chamber was still glowing with the shard's light, its warmth spilling across the stone walls and chasing away the shadows that had ruled the city for so long. The blind alien girl stood tall in the center, her frail frame now cloaked in a strange strength, her hands holding the shard as if it were part of her soul. Though her eyes could not see the brilliance, she felt its light within her, spreading through her bones, her heart, her spirit, and the people who watched felt it too. The silence in the chamber was not emptiness, it was awe. A silence born when fear breaks and wonder begins to take its place. The elders, sitting high on their stone seats, shifted uncomfortably. Their power had always come from controlling belief, from convincing the people that weakness was a curse, that blindness was shame. But now the girl had turned their own words against them. She had shown that curse was not blindness but cruelty, that treasure was not gold but hope. Their whispers grew desperate, their voices sharp with fear. "Do not be fooled," one cried. "This is a trick, a human trick. She is still cursed." But the people no longer listened with the same blind faith, for in the girl's trembling voice they had heard truth, and truth had power greater than command. The girl raised her head, her blind eyes glowing faintly with the shard's reflection, her voice soft but strong. "I was nothing to you. I was thrown away. Yet even in the trash I lived, I endured, I survived. You called me cursed, but I tell you now, curse is turning away from kindness. Curse is refusing to see worth. I am blind, but I see clearer than you, for I see the treasure that lies in the broken, in the abandoned, in the forgotten." Her words filled the chamber like fire, burning away the chains of silence, and some in the crowd began to cry. Others lowered their heads in shame, while others clenched their fists. Uncertain if they should fight or kneel, the human stood beside her, silent but proud, his presence like a shield, his eyes scanning the crowd, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, reminding her that she was not alone. He had given her pieces of his world not to save her, but to show her that she had always carried treasure inside. Now the people saw it too, though many resisted. Though the elders still hissed like snakes, the truth could not be hidden again. Then something unexpected happened. One of the youngest aliens in the crowd, a child no older than the girl had been when she was abandoned, stepped forward and knelt before her, his voice shaking as he whispered, "You are not cursed. You are light." Others followed, first the weak, the poor, the forgotten who had always known suffering. They came forward and lowered their heads, and with each one the flame grew brighter. Soon dozens knelt, then hundreds, their voices murmuring words of respect, until even the elders could not silence the rising tide of faith. The elders tried to command, tried to shout, but their voices cracked, their power slipping from their hands like sand. For the people had seen something they could not unsee, a blind girl who had turned scraps into hope, a cursed one who had spoken with more courage than any leader. The elders' words were drowned by the sound of kneeling feet, by the sound of a people choosing to believe in something greater than fear. The girl felt the weight of it all. She was still blind, still frail, still the same abandoned child who had once crawled in filth. Yet now she was more. She was a symbol. She was proof that even the weakest could carry light. Her hands tightened around the shard, and her voice rose one last time. "I am not your curse, I am your mirror. Look into me and see what you fear. Look into me and see what you have lost. But also look into me and see what you can become. I was nothing, Yet now I stand because someone saw treasure where others saw trash. You can choose the same. You can choose to see worth where others see none." The chamber erupted in cries, not of anger but of release. The people shouted her name, a name they once spat as an insult, now spoken with respect. The blind girl, the cursed one, the treasure-bearer. She could not see them, but she felt the air shift. She felt the world tilt. She felt the weight of legacy pressing upon her shoulders. And though it frightened her, she did not break, for she knew she was no longer alone. The human leaned close, his voice low but filled with pride. "You were never cursed. You were always treasure. Remember this moment, for it is not the shard that shines. It is you." His words wrapped around her like a final gift. A gift greater than food or crystal or fragments of machines, a gift of truth. She turned her face toward him, tears slipping down her cheeks. Not tears of sorrow but of release, of freedom, of belonging. From that day, the blind alien girl was no longer remembered as the starving child who ate from trash. She was remembered as the one who showed her people that hope could be found in the broken, that light could shine even in blindness, that treasure could be discovered in the most unexpected places. The elders would fade, their voices drowned by the strength of a story that could not be erased. And the people would carry her words like a banner across the stars. The human remained by her side, not as her savior, but as her companion. Together they walked through the ruined city, no longer as outcasts, but as symbols of resilience. And wherever they went, the story followed, a story whispered from one world to another until even across the galaxy, beings would hear of the blind alien girl who searched for scraps in the dirt and of the human who showed her that she was never trash. She was treasure.